Hi, hello, hi, good morning. Hi, good morning. I'm great. So this is question 3. This is a great question. I think this is a great question that you should just like eat up. So task 3. So they tell us that this is one of these where we look for problems. And if you remember, I think I mentioned something that the weaknesses are in the task. So it's not a trick question. It literally is you find that weakness and you pull it out. There are so many weaknesses here that the mark scheme I don't think will be able to cope with. You could almost create weaknesses if you wanted to from this story. So let's begin. I'm just going to go literally walk through them, and then you can expand them later on. Now, remember that when anything tells you, what's the consequence of this? Two things actually. The context is always in the context of controls. Remember, this exam is all fundamentally grounded in the idea of controls. Number one. Number two, when you're reading this, what's critical is that you always want to try your best to map it to your crime and your soap maps. You want to be using that kind of language for the examiner, so you know what you're talking about. Yes. And just kind of throw that in. And also, when we talk about why this company won't do what the problems are, because the real issue is that they're not able to achieve their objectives. And that's your angle. Right. So anything that affects those objectives, so whether it's in growth or revenue increases or expansion or just taking a hold in the market or whatever it is, or building their organization, whatever it is, that's your connection. Okay, great. Let's look at it. Payroll and payments. This company operates 2 separate payrolls. Now, you're looking for weaknesses, right? And you know straight away that by operating 2 separate payrolls, there is just room for error. And it's hard work. And generally, again, it says here that this is a specially written payroll software. So it means that it's costly. You will always need to have the same people who help you fix it if you like to keep on coming in to work on it and to make sure it's maintained effectively. So that's the first issue, the fact that you're making 2 separate payrolls. So, but we understand it's still a weakness, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. These things happen, but it's a weakness. Ultimately, we want one payroll. It's cheaper, it's more secure, and they're better controls. You probably now need 2 separate control levels with these 2 separate payrolls. Anyway, one payroll is for weekly paid employees, another is for monthly paid. Okay, thank you for telling us. So we have this lady called Jane, payroll clerk. She runs the weekly payroll every Thursday, and most of their pay happens by backs. However, 28% of them is by cash. Weakness. Straight away. Weakness. I mean, it's rare to still be paying people by cash. Straight away, the problems are that you can have theft, you can have loss, you can have fraud, right? Because there's an access to cash. And that's a problem. Straight away. So the problem is here that 28%, which is a big amount, 28%, that's almost a third. That's a big amount. So that's a problem here, another weakness. So it says Jane advises. I don't even know what this means. I'm not quite sure what that means, advises. I mean, this is just not technical at all. There's nothing emotional about our subject. Jane should give Hina a signed document of the list of the 28% with their names and how much, and that should be reviewed by a senior manager before Hin starts withdrawing any money. This issue of advisors, does she just tell her? I mean, what's going on here? And then it says here, Hina is in charge of the cash book, and the cash book is withdrawn. And what does she do? Hina collects the money from the bank every Thursday and locks it in the office safe. And then Jane assembles the pay packet for Friday. This is collusion. Lack of segregation of duty, potential collusion, fraud. Both of them could be working together. We don't even know what they're doing. They just seem both of them in control of this entire area. So that's a problem right there. So you want to totally exploit that issue. Second issue is that she collects the money on a Thursday afternoon and then locks it in the office safe overnight. That's a risk as well, right? We don't know where this safe is. Someone can break into the safe. It seems something done regularly. So what if someone comes in and breaks into it? 30% of workers by cash. That's a lot of cash overnight. Why don't you do it in the morning of the day? Right? Or why don't they collect their money in the afternoon? Why pay people on Friday morning? It's absurd. They're still working during the day. I mean, there's so much you could go on. But anyway, 4 p.m., exactly. It says here 4 p.m. on every Friday. So there is time. You should do it on Friday. Employees queue outside, collect their pay packets, state procedures. You want to see people, that should be a strength. But in reality, employees ask a colleague, to pay. This is just absurd. So that's a weakness right there. Fraud. Jane allows this to happen because, so now we have bigger questions now. The control culture, the culture of control. So where we talked about crime, the control environment, the environment, right? It seems somehow that Jane doesn't respect the control environment. So this is where we talk about an audit where you have internal controls, where you have inherent risks. Jane is an inherent risk. So whatever controls we put in place, she just seems to override them. Yes. So that's a control risk right there. It says for those on weekly, this is going to their bank account by Friday. That's good. This is run 3 days. Oh, that seems quite normal to me. 3 days before the month end, and all these stuff are paid by BACS. Typically, I think BACS is run about 3-4 days prior to the month end. I mean, I'm not quite sure. I think the argument really is that it should be. There doesn't seem to be anyone who goes wrong, who seems to be able to sign this off before it is run. So maybe the issues really are to do with the lack of control over signing and making sure it is looked at before it is run. So then what does it say? She has to notify HMRC. She therefore makes 4 or 5. I mean, we just need to be clear, and really this should be automated by now. Right? This should be automated and each submission takes a couple of hours to complete. So Jane does this as well. Further lack of segregation of duty. So Jane should someone should be calculating the amounts and someone else should be running this through. Finally, what makes this all very much ridiculous is that the last 2 days, a part-time member of staff is asked to help with the cash payment. So again, risk of fraud, risk of collusion, and it's just better to have someone who is a regular person doing it. I think that's a bit more. Those are better controls. I think it's just having access to this cash we're trying to prevent. We don't want this degree of access. So we've already hit 5 by now. So and you could have picked 3 or 2 from 3 from there, and some very good ones here. Specially written software, 6 years, not being integrated, weakness. Jane therefore posts the payroll herself, posts as well using journal entries. Does anyone check it? However, the software is effective, and Jane is reluctant. Again, inherent risk. She's very familiar with using it. So we have Jane here as a potential a bottleneck, because she might actually be, if you like, she has too much power, and she doesn't want to let go. And then finally, she backs up the data after each and saves a copy on a memory stick. No. She should save it in the cloud. Memory sticks get corrupted. We have potential loss of data. This is locked in the office safe for security. Well, that's okay. At least that's some sort of strength. So that's just coming up to 10 minutes. So there's a lot there. You could easily almost 10 errors that you could find there. So yes, please expand on those. Again, we're always trying to relate these to as much as you can mention the words crime and OAP spasms. You try and look for a way to always bring these issues in. This question of segregation and authorization, right? And these are all this is the language you should be using. So please, every time, try and practice using this language when discussing these issues. Okay, great stuff. See you tomorrow with question 4.